Hello and welcome to Creep You Out TV, your daily digest of true and creepy stories from all over the world. I'm your host, Miss Midnight. Please follow us on Twitter at Creep You Out TV, and don't forget to subscribe to receive all newly recorded content straight to your inbox. Now let's begin. Today's creepy story is about a serial killer named Albert DeSalvo, whom some believe to be the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo's father, Frank DeSalvo, was a Newfoundland fisherman who had found work in Boston as a machinist. A sadistic monster, he would beat his wife and 6 children on a regular basis. Fists, belts, and pipes were used for the smallest of indiscretions. As a boy, Albert DeSalvo witnessed his father beat his mother until all her teeth had fallen out. Then, as she lay on the floor in pain, Frank DeSalvo took his wife's hands and proceeded to break each finger in turn. His father would repeatedly pick up prostitutes, bring them into the family home, and have intercourse with them in front of his children. Forever being arrested for not supporting his family, Frank DeSalvo once attempted to relieve the financial burden by selling Albert and his 4 sisters to a farmer for $9. Many serial killers suffered as children, and Albert DeSalvo's early years appear to have been exceptionally horrific. Might his tragic childhood have influenced his future as a serial killer, as some have claimed? Or might there be something else in play? After all, none of DeSalvo's siblings became murderers. Perhaps, though, these are the wrong questions. A better one might be, was Albert DeSalvo really the Boston Strangler? The murders attributed to the Boston Strangler began on 14 June 1962 with the murder of Anna Slessers. The body of this 55-year-old Latavian seamstress was discovered in the early evening when her son arrived at her apartment, intending to take her to church. He thought initially that his mother had committed suicide. Indeed, the fear had led him to break down her door when she hadn't responded with his knocking. However, the police quickly came to a different conclusion. Slessor's body was found, half-clothed in a robe, lying on the bathroom floor. It was obvious that she had been sexually assaulted and then killed. Death had been brought about by the cord of the robe, which had been tightly knotted around her neck. Slessor's apartment appeared to have been burglared, though many valuables had been overlooked. The police theorized that the murderer's original plan had been to steal from the apartment, but had come across Slessers, who he then molested. Their supposition would be questioned when 16 days later, a 68-year-old named Nina Nichols was found dead in her apartment. As with the Latvian seamstress, Nichols had been sexually assaulted. She had been killed by a nylon stocking tied around her neck. The victim's apartment bore signs of the burglary, but again, most valuables had been left behind. Oddly, the murderer appeared to have gone through Nichols' mail and her address book. Later that day, the body of another woman was found in the Boston suburb of Lynn, some 25 kilometers to the north. The victim, 65-year-old Helen Blake, had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a nylon stocking. Her apartment had been ransacked. After the discovery of 2 bodies in a single day, the Boston Police Department issued a warning to all women in the area, advising them to be wary of strangers and to ensure every door was locked. All detectives in the force were transferred to the case. Police holidays were postponed, and a thorough investigation of all known sex offenders was undertaken. However, these efforts did nothing to prevent the Boston Strangler, as he had come to be known, from striking again. On 19 August, a 75-year-old widow, Ida Urga, was murdered in the city's West End. Efforts had been made to arrange the corpse in something reminiscent of an obstetrical examination, which faced the door as to be the first thing seen upon entering. Although a pillowcase was knotted around her neck, Urga had died from manual strangulation. Her body lay undiscovered for 2 days. Before it was found, the strangler had already murdered another woman, a 67-year-old nurse named Jane Sullivan, on the other side of the city. Her body was found in the apartment bathtub, a nylon stocking knotted around her neck. But the corpse has been lying in August heat for 10 days and was in such a state of decomposition that police were unable to determine whether or not the victim had been sexually assaulted. Nonetheless, police estimated that Ida Urga and Jane Sullivan had been murdered within 24 hours of one another. Many studying the Boston Strangler describe his murders as having taken place in two waves. The first begins with the 14 June 1962 murder of Anna Slessors and ends less than 2 weeks later with Jane Sullivan's killing. What followed was more than 3 months of inactivity. When the Boston Strangler resumed, his preference in victims appeared to have switched from older to younger women. The first victim of the second wave was Sophie Clark, an attractive 20-year-old medical student, murdered just a few blocks away from what had been Anna Slessors' apartment. She had been strangled using a nylon stocking. A half slip had also been placed around her neck. This time there was no evidence of sexual assault, perhaps due to the fact she was menstruating. Semen was found close to her body on the living room rug. The Strangler's next victim, 23-year-old Patricia Bessette, was murdered on the morning of 31 December 1962. Her body was found lying face up, covers drawn over her neck. When removed, they revealed that Bessette had been strangled with several stockings and a blouse knotted and interwoven. She had also been raped. As the first months of 1963 passed without incident, hopes began to rise that the Strangler would never strike again. However, on 8 May, the body of 23-year-old graduate student Beverly Sammons was discovered in her Boston. As the first months of 1963 passed without incident, hopes began to rise that the Strangler would never strike again. However, on 8 May, the body of 23-year-old graduate student Beverly Sammons was discovered in her Boston apartment. Although 2 scarves and a nylon stocking had been knotted around her neck, they had played no role in her death. Rather, Sammons had been stabbed 17 times, including 4 wounds to the throat. There, following after a quiet period, when the Strangler resumed, he appeared to have been returning to his old victim type. The body of Evelyn Corbin, a 58-year-old divorcee, was found in her bed. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with 2 stockings tied around her neck. On 25 November, the date on which the body of John F. Kennedy was being interred at Arlington National Cemetery, the killer struck again. His victim, 23-year-old Joanne Graff, was beaten, raped, and strangled with 2 nylon stockings and a black leotard. On 4 January 1964, a 19-year-old named Mary Sullivan was sexually assaulted and killed. Her body was left sitting upright in bed, dressed only in a bra and open blouse. Around Sullivan's neck was a rope the Strangler had made consisting of a nylon stocking and 2 scarves. He had left a message for the authorities, a greeting card propped up against the corpse's left foot, and it read, "Happy New Year." If those attempting to catch the Boston Strangler saw anything happy in the new year, it lay in the fact that he appeared to commit no further murders. There seemed to be no explanation for the inactivity. Then in March 1965, they were provided with an answer when Albert DeSalvo, an inmate of the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, confessed to the murders. It appeared that they had unknowingly locked up the Boston Strangler months before. Born 3 November 1931, Albert Henry DeSalvo had progressed from a ghastly childhood to becoming a career criminal. He once stated that it had been his father who had taught him how to steal. DeSalvo's first arrest took place in November 1943, just after his 12th birthday, when he was charged with assault and battery with intent to commit robbery. He was sent to the Lyman School for Boys, the first reform school in the United States. DeSalvo's education at Lyman did nothing to curb his criminal behavior. Despite his shameful record, at the age of 17, he managed to join the United States Army. He was sent to Europe, where he met and married a German woman whom he brought back to the United States. He was then posted to Fort Hamilton, New York, and Fort Dix, New Jersey. It was while serving at the second of the 2 bases that DeSalvo was arrested for having molested a 9-year-old girl. He escaped prosecution only because the girl's mother didn't want to press charges. His sex drive was described as insatiable. He demanded sex from his wife 6 or more times a day. When she rebuffed his advances, DeSalvo would fly into a rage and accuse her of being frigid. Their relationship soured further after her first child was born with a pelvic disease. Fearing further children with birth defects, DeSalvo's wife all but curtailed their sex life. When he confessed to the murders that had been attributed to the Boston Strangler, DeSalvo was imprisoned for a string of seemingly unrelated assaults. The last occurred on 27 October 1964, which had led directly to his arrest. On that morning, DeSalvo broke into the apartment of a sleeping 20-year-old university student. After she was awoken, DeSalvo proceeded to tie the woman up and then fondle her. The victim's description led police to identify the assailant. When DeSalvo's photograph was published in Boston area newspapers, other women identified him as the man who had assaulted them. DeSalvo was not a suspect in any of the strangling cases. His confession was made to fellow prisoner George Nasser, who reported it to F. Lee Bailey, his attorney. Bailey, in turn, took on DeSalvo as a client and represented him as he repeated his confession to the police. All who heard the prisoner speak were impressed by the accuracy with which he described the crime scenes. Though there were some inconsistencies, DeSalvo provided details that had not been made available to the public. To the tally of 11 murders attributed to the Strangler, DeSalvo added 2 others. The first victim, a 68-year-old woman named Mary Brown, who had been found bludgeoned, stabbed, and strangled in her home in Lawrence on 6 March 1963. The second woman, also elderly, had been so frightened that she had died of a heart attack before he could strangle her. However, not one piece of physical evidence was found at any of the crime scenes that would substantiate his story. Despite the 2,000-page transcript of his confession, DeSalvo stood trial for only their unrelated crimes of robbery and sexual assaults. In January 1967, he was sentenced to life in prison. The next month, he and 2 fellow inmates escaped from Bridgewater State Hospital, setting in motion a full-scale manhunt. DeSalvo left behind a note stating the escape was intended as a means of focusing attention on the conditions in the hospital and his own situation. He gave himself up the next day and was transferred to the maximum security Walpole State Prison. On 25 November 1973, DeSalvo was found murdered in the prison infirmary. His killer or killers have never been identified. There have always been serious doubts as to whether DeSalvo was a Boston Strangler. At the time of his confession, it seemed all who had known him, including police officers with whom DeSalvo had long histories, believed he was incapable of committing the crimes. Confusing the issue with the belief among many in the police department that there was no Boston Strangler, rather that the 11 murders were committed by 2 or more individuals. Today, skeptics of the idea that there was a single strangler point out that the victims came from different age and ethnic groups, and that there were very different patterns to the murders. Moreover, killing by strangulation in the Boston area did not end with Mary Sullivan, the supposed final victim. And then there was the matter of evidence. There was no physical evidence linking DeSalvo to any of the crime scenes. No witnesses could place him at or near any of the sites. Why would DeSalvo admit to these horrible crimes if he didn't actually commit them? One theory rests on DeSalvo's realization that he would likely be incarcerated for the rest of his life for the crimes of burglary and assault. Looking for a means with which to support his wife and children, he entered into an ill-fated scheme in which George Nasser would receive a significant reward for turning in DeSalvo as the Boston Strangler. Accordingly, the 2 men would have to split the proceeds. DeSalvo once told F. Lee Bailey that he hoped to be able to provide for his family by writing a book on his crimes. He was murdered before ever being able to carry out the plan.